And joining us now on the line from New York, Amin Hussein. He's an organizer with Occupy Wall Street. And with us here in studio, Sakura Saunders. She's an organizer with Occupy Toronto. And as I welcome both of you to the program in New York and in Toronto, I suspect that the last image most people have of both of your movements is last fall, certainly in Toronto, tents being cleared away from places downtown. Same story in New York City. Amin, to you first, I'd like to know what you folks have been up to since then.
We've been focusing on various projects, foreclosures, auctions, blockades where we shut down courts so that they don't give homes away. That's one aspect of the movement. And another aspect of it is building solidarity with other labor organizations and undocumented workers and organizations in the city that have been doing that represent various social movements within the United States.
So perhaps not on television as much, but certainly still active. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely on the ground, and came up with our own theory magazine where we theorize about the movement and what does it mean to not have demands, and how does that advance the will to justice and further the social movements that are already in place.
Okay, Sakura, how about here in Toronto?
Well, here in Toronto, we've actually have been very active since we were kicked out of St. James Park. But we've been active as a lot of different autonomous groups that come together during the General Assemblies to kind of report back and recruit volunteers for various actions. For example, we did Occupy the Budget, where we scheduled a 3-day occupation out in front of City Hall when, Ford was trying to pass his budget. And yes, and he actually, that was a success because we did see a lot of the cuts that they were proposing being rolled back. We've also been doing a lot of speaking events, a lot of reflection, a lot of the members of Occupy Toronto were catching up with the rest of their lives as well, so that we could reemerge in the spring, as we are going to do, learning the hard lessons that we learned when we were in the park. Much like Amir was saying, we've been having stronger ties with other social justice, migrant justice organizations, labor movement, and we're coming together tomorrow on May 1st. We're working with the coalition of No One Is Legal and the May 1st movement, which is kind of an umbrella organization with many groups all around Toronto.
Going to come back to that.
Sure.
We want to get caught up on what's been going on in the meantime before we talk about Toronto. I think it's fair to say that Occupy gets a lot of credit for sort of establishing in the public's mind this notion of too much power for the 1% at the expense of the 99%. But you've also been criticized for not having, I guess, what some would consider to be tangible goals that, either in terms of legislation or programs, something more concrete. And I wonder whether any of that has changed in the interim.
Not at all. I mean, one of the best decisions we made, and we debated this in July and August of last year, was that how are we going to build a movement that can actually promise the type of structural change that's necessary, not only in the United States, but in the world? And what does it mean to create spaces that provide for an anti-capitalist formations to evolve? And how can we build solidarity with different groups? And it was really important to not have demands, but that doesn't mean we demand of each other. And that's where the horizontal organization comes in, and we're very comfortable with that. We also know that, the idea of legislation, the idea of bits and pieces, that's not going to work. That's exactly Occupy's contribution, right? It's to say that, the days of identity politics are over. The idea is it's over, not that race or identity doesn't matter, but that we can come together in forms of alliance in public spaces using our bodies to protest inequalities, political, social, and economic. As a matter of fact, the 99 to 1%, that was an outreach tool largely, right? It's pointing at one of many problems. But in fact, the idea of 1% to 99% is just the tip of the iceberg. Really what we're pointing to is that a political system that's broken, that represents privileged people, elites, economic and political elites that have forgotten about the people. And in that context, how can you bring about change?
Okay, let me go to Sakura here and get a follow-up here, because I want to know if you endorse I think the way Amin put it was pretty well, pretty good actually. The sort of horizontal organizational structure as opposed to vertical. Is that what you guys are about? So in some respects forswearing this particular law, this particular program that you want to see implemented?
Definitely. I think that horizontal organizing is at the core of the Occupy movement, the General Assembly structure. We're really trying to build a movement from below, create a space that's accessible, that people can come and request help in addressing the injustices that they face.
But at the end of the day, do you not have to ask for something, I don't know, I'm just asking here, do you not have to ask for something specific? Like we want the tax rates at this level on these people, or something kind of concrete like that?
Well, for the most part, the individual actions that Occupy Toronto engages in do have much more of a specific message to them. We've done marches for Indigenous sovereignty, of course, the Occupy the Budget action. I mean, it was definitely opposing the cuts to social services that were going on in Toronto. So with each of our actions, we target a specific issue. And those actions are endorsed by Occupy Toronto in the General Assembly. But as a movement, we feel that the 99% banner is very useful. Generally speaking, people's needs, not corporate greed, is a mantra of the movement. And so we don't want to become a single issue organization. We want to be much more fluid than that.
I appreciate that. And I mean, maybe you could follow up on this. Do you feel at some point you have to sort of engage with the existing institutions within either the political world or the business world or whatever in order to have your message and your desires take that next step? Is that part of the plan?
No, that's not part of the plan. I mean, Occupy has a spectrum of people in it, but they enter it as individuals, and we create spaces for people's voices, A, to be heard, and B, that the level of discourse gets elevated about issues dealing with healthcare, education, work, but ultimately it's also about freedom. And I think what Occupy brings is that we're going to be on the outside of this movement, on the outside of these specific social struggles, because those specific social struggles, those people that are they are best situated to make those demands. And the Occupy movement stands in solidarity. And that's why we're able to organize with with undocumented workers and with unions.
Okay, but I'm going to jump in. I mean, because my hunch is that there are people watching this who are saying, okay, that sounds great, but at the end of the day, you're either for Obamacare or you're against Obamacare. Or if you're in favor of repealing Obamacare, you want to put this in its place. So if you care about health care, you got to sign on the dotted line somewhere. Where are you guys signing on the dotted line?
We're not signing. We're not demanding anything from the structures. We're asking the structures to tell us whether they're legitimate or not. I campaigned for Obama in 2008. I will not campaign for him again. The people are good with rhetoric. Politicians can give you and sell you and do all that stuff. What Occupy brings to the forefront is that people have found their power from Tunisia to Egypt to Greece to Spain. And it's the people power that we're reclaiming. And that's going to put pressure on the institutions like Obama to actually prove that they're legitimate, that they are a government that actually does represent the people and not the 1%.
Okay, in which case, let me bring the story then back to Toronto for a second. Sakura, tomorrow's May Day. I don't know if you meant it to be May Day. I mean, did you mean?
Of course, International Workers' Day.
International Workers' Day, okay. Tell me this, what's going to happen tomorrow if everything unfolds according to the way you'd like to see it unfold?
Sure, well, there's a huge mass rally and march that's happening at 4 p.m. And before then, at Nathan Phillips Square.
Okay.
So
City Hall Square in downtown Toronto.
Exactly. But before then, there's going to be a number of autonomous actions that are taking place. For example, Occupy Gardens is doing a garden action on Parliament. Queen's Park. And then there's going to be a giant chess game. So street theater is going to be taking place. Past 4 o'clock, we're going to be, rallying, speeches, food, marching, celebrating.
How many people are going to show up?
Thousands.
That's pretty nebulous. How many people are going to show up?
Well, I couldn't tell you.
Thousands could mean 3,000 or it could mean 100,000. What do you think?
I would probably put it around a few thousand to more,
okay.
Is what we're expecting. And then we're going to have a cultural event where we have, lots of musicians and things like that work towards social justice. And then at 9 p.m., we are doing a march to a not yet disclosed location to reoccupy for 24 hours. And, much like the park did at St. James Park, we're going to be creating a space with workshops. We're going to be screening movies all night long.
Just for 24 hours?
Only for 24 hours. We're operating on a strict leave no trace behind ethic. So, we're going to clean up after ourselves and end with a General Assembly.
Okay, let me find out what's going on in New York
Sure.
City. Amin, if we watch our American Network News tomorrow night, what are we going to see having taken place in New York City?
Pop-up occupation in Bryant Park as early as 8 p.m. with affinity groups jumping off to support 99 pickets around Midtown area, various targets, and then a march, an unpermitted march from there to Union Square with Guitar Army. And then at Union Square is the rally with undocumented workers and unions, with a joint statement being read and various music, and then from there a joint march down to the financial district where there'll be an after party and reoccupations and various events. There's also a free university. All that is undisclosed. Affinity groups have various plans, but it's about having fun.
It's about having fun, but is it about having fun for 24 hours like in the Toronto example, or for longer?
I really can't say.
You can't say because you don't know or because you don't want to say? I'm not being a smart aleck here. I'm really just kind of curious.
Well, I mean, let me just point out the fact that we have had multiple attempts at reoccupation, and we have been faced with police brutality in New York, and it hasn't mattered whether it's 24 hours or it's 3 days. So I think it's if the opportunities present themselves, then we'll make decisions on the ground.
Okay, Amin, what does success look like for Occupy tomorrow?
I think we already achieved it. We made it through the winter. We've weathered the storm of violence versus diversity of tactics, something that was aimed to kind of tear apart this movement. We have stuck to the idea of no demands, which fuels imagination and calls attention to the world that the idea that we reached the end of history after communism is false, that people have the potential to reimagine how they live. I think that the unity of purpose where various workers and Occupy and organizations have come together is already the type of alliance that is the beginning of beginnings.
Now that's the specific. Sakura, maybe you could tell us what in general success for Occupy looks like in your view.
Well, to be part of a growing movement. So, I liked what Amir said, that we've already been successful. We've been having, so many people showing up at all of our General Assemblies lately. We've been doing art builds. We've been engaging a lot of people. We've been integrating ourselves with other social justice organizations and labor organizations in Toronto. So we very much feel like we've been successful. Concretely, a successful 24-hour occupation that isn't shut down by the police, that shows a massive amount of support in terms of numbers of people who are willing to spend the night. And of course, a successful occupation is much more than that. We're feeding people, we're leading free schools, we're facilitating discussions, and we're going to end with another General Assembly. So what we want is to be part of a growing movement where people can easily plug into it and get involved in working for social justice.
And Amin, just one last thing to you. Have you had discussions with the authorities in New York, maybe the mayor's office, maybe the police commissioner's office, to ensure that some of your people aren't beaten up again this time?
Well, I personally haven't. I know that in the planning for May Day, there has been a liaison with the police through unions since they're comfortable with that role. But no, I mean, from our standpoint, I'm just here getting on Twitter right now that they've picked up several people even before as a preemptive move. So I don't think that's, yeah.
Are you suggesting you're not off to a great start?
We're off to a great, the thing is like, we're here and we're growing. And the conditions that brought us people together aren't going away. You know, all you have to do is look at the stock market and look at whether people are employed and whether housing and foreclosures are stopping. They're not. So, you know, we have work to do. We'll be around.
Understood. Amin Hussein, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight on TVO, and be safe out there for Occupy Wall Street. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.